All right, today we're jumping into a really fascinating economic detective story. This is a puzzle that took 2 whole decades to play out, where you have a huge global economy that just seemed to completely break a fundamental rule of growth. The question is, how on earth did Russia's economy grow so much faster than some really solid economic theories said it should have? So let's follow the clues and see if we can crack this case.
So get this, between 1996 and 2016, a pretty well-established economic model predicted that Russia's economy had a kind of speed limit. It should have been growing at about 2.1% a year. But that's not what happened at all. The reality was way different. The economy actually grew a full percentage point faster, hitting an average of 3.1%. Now, you might be thinking, 1%, what's the big deal? But trust me, over 20 years, that is a massive gap. It's the difference between an economy that's just kind of chugging along and one that's really picking up steam. So yeah, what was going on here?
Okay, so to really get why this is such a puzzle, we need to look at the rule book that Russia apparently just threw out the window. It's a really interesting economic idea, and it's called Thirlwall's Law.
So at its very core, Thirlwall's law is all about something called the balance of payments constraint. And honestly, the best way to think about it is like your own personal budget, right? You just can't keep buying more stuff, upgrading your lifestyle if your paycheck isn't getting bigger to match it. Eventually, you're going to run into trouble. Well, believe it or not, a whole country's economy works in a pretty similar way.
So, put really simply, a country's exports, the stuff it sells to the rest of the world, that's its income. And its imports, the stuff it buys, those are its expenses. So, for a country to grow steadily over the long run, that export income has to be able to pay for all its import expenses. It means a country's growth is basically tied to how much everyone else in the world wants to buy its products. And this whole relationship creates a really simple dynamic, a kind of push and pull. Think of exports as the gas pedal, the engine for growth, and a growing appetite for imports, well, that can act like the brakes. So the theory really boils down to two key ideas, two forces, you could say. First, you've got export elasticity. That's just a fancy way of asking, as the rest of the world gets richer, how much more of your stuff do they buy? Then there's import elasticity. That flips it around and asks, as your country gets richer, how much more foreign stuff do you start buying? And the balance between those two, man, that is everything. So the logic here is pretty straightforward, right? If the world's hunger for your exports is growing faster than your country's hunger for imports, then you're in a fantastic spot to grow your economy. But on the flip side, if your country starts wanting way more foreign goods than the world wants of yours, well, your growth gets stuck. The brakes get slammed on. And this is where our mystery really deepens. Because the study we're looking at found that for Russia, its demand for imports grew way faster than the world's demand for its exports. So, according to all the rules we just talked about, Russia's economy should have been hitting the brakes, and hitting them hard. But like we saw, it was doing the exact opposite. It was cruising in the fast lane. So, what gives? Okay, so if the theory says the brakes should have been on, what was Russia's secret? What was the override switch? Well, the answer isn't some kind of complicated financial trickery. No, it's something way more basic, something at the very heart of its economy. And here's the clue. The secret wasn't really about how much stuff Russia was selling. It was all about what it was selling. The specific type of goods it exported held the key, like a secret code that let it blow right past that normal economic speed limit. 57.6%. Just let that number sink in for a second. For over 2 decades, that was the average slice of Russia's exports that came from just one thing: fuel. We're talking crude oil and natural gas. That is a truly staggering amount to be concentrated in just one single category. Look at this. Fuel exports just completely dwarfed everything else. Manufactured goods, metals, you name it. This wasn't just an export for Russia, it was, for all intents and purposes, the export. And when one thing is that dominant, well, it changes the entire equation. So there it is. That was the secret override. Oil and gas are what economists call price inelastic. And that just means modern economies absolutely need them to run. So even when prices go up or down, the demand from the rest of the world stays incredibly high. This massive, constant demand for Russian fuel just generated these enormous revenues, creating this huge trade surplus year after year. Basically, Russia's income from the world was just so big it could easily pay for all its spending on imports, totally bypassing the very constraint that should have been slowing it down. And when you look at the final numbers side by side, it's just so stark. It doesn't matter if you're measuring the whole economy's GDP or the GDP for each person. The reality of Russia's growth just blew away what the theory predicted. That oil and gas engine wasn't just powerful enough to close the gap, it was powerful enough to smash right through that theoretical speed limit. So, okay, the mystery is solved. But, explaining what happened in the past is one thing. The very structure that allowed for all this growth, well, it raises a really, really big question about the future.
The researchers who originally dug into all this really hit the nail on the head. They pointed out that as the whole world starts moving toward green energy, the very thing that propped up Russia's economy for 2 decades, well, it's suddenly on shaky ground.
Think about it. This incredible advantage, this secret fuel that literally allowed Russia to defy a law of economic gravity, might now have an expiration date stamped on it. The engine that was perfect for the last 20 years might not be the right one for the next 20. That massive global demand that was always a given, suddenly, it's not so certain anymore.
And that brings us right to the final and most critical question of all. The economic story of Russia's recent past was written entirely with oil and gas. But now, as the whole world starts turning the page to a new chapter, a green energy chapter, you have to ask, what's going to fuel Russia's growth in the future? And that, right there, is the multi-trillion-dollar question that ends our detective story.